She stepped off the transport van, her duffel bag heavy over one shoulder and her boots sinking slightly into the sand of the parade ground. She felt the heat of the sun burning down on her neck, and the weight of 100 eyes silently measuring every movement. She scanned the rows of recruits lined up perfectly straight, their faces hardened and expressionless, trying to blend in. She adjusted her uniform and kept her gaze forward, but the whispers began almost immediately. She could feel it before she heard it, a ripple of murmurs and stifled laughter traveling through the ranks. She shifted slightly, hoping to make herself smaller and not draw attention, but then a sharp chuckle broke the line and several recruits turned their heads toward her, pointing fingers and smirking. The tattoo on her back, partially exposed above the collar of her shirt, caught their eyes and became the center of their scrutiny. She swallowed hard, wishing she could cover it or make it disappear. Every command barked by the drill instructors sounded louder in her ears, and every stumble she made was magnified by the sharp glares around her. She tried to mimic the movements of those ahead, pretending to know exactly what to do, while inside a knot of anxiety twisted tighter with every step. The drill instructor stormed down the line, his boots thudding against the ground like gunfire. Each step brought closer, a reminder of her place as an outsider. She felt the eyes of her squadmates burning into her back as though they could see through her uniform and into her every thought. The tattoo seemed to mock her silently, its meaning only known to her, and yet the others made jokes and whispered secrets about who she was and what she might have done to earn such a mark. She wanted to speak and explain, but her voice stuck in her throat, and the instructor's sharp bark cut any attempt to respond. She lowered her head slightly and tried to focus on the commands, counting every movement, repeating them in her mind like a mantra, hoping the motion would drown out the ridicule. Sweat trickled down her temple and stung her eyes as she kept her stance rigid, ignoring the stares and giggles around her. But every time she shifted her shoulders to adjust, she felt the eyes again, and the whispers returned louder than before. She wondered if she would survive the first week, or if the constant attention would break her spirit before she had even begun to prove herself. And then a shadow moved at the edge of the parade ground, someone watching intently, not a drill instructor but a figure she could not yet identify, their gaze fixed on the tattoo as if it recognized something she could not see, leaving her with a growing sense that everything was about to change. The next morning arrived with a harsh wind that whipped across the parade ground as she struggled to get her uniform straight and her boots laced tightly enough to keep her balance. She could feel the lingering stares from the day before, and the whispers had not stopped. They followed her like shadows through every drill, push-ups, sit-ups, sprints, and the endless obstacle courses. Her arms burned with each repetition and her legs trembled from the exertion, but she refused to give the recruits the satisfaction of seeing her fail. Some of them smirked openly as she stumbled slightly over a hurdle or lagged behind during a timed run. Their voices were sharp and teasing, and every joke about the tattoo made her cheeks burn with a mix of embarrassment and anger. She clenched her fists and forced herself to focus on the next command, trying to drown out the laughter that seemed to echo in her skull. Each obstacle became a mental battle as much as a physical one. She imagined herself collapsing and letting the ridicule win, but then she remembered the tattoo and the meaning behind it, the silent promise it carried of strength and endurance. She wanted to hide it under her uniform completely, but even that small glimpse had already set her apart from the others, and she knew they were watching, waiting for another sign of weakness. The drill instructors barked orders louder than ever, and any hesitation was met with a harsh correction. She felt the sting of embarrassment every time she faltered, but refused to let it show. The other recruits began placing bets quietly on whether she would quit or survive the day, and she could hear fragments of their conversations carried by the wind. Their eyes followed her, as if she were a performer on a stage with no curtain to hide behind. She began to question if her past experiences had prepared her for this, or if she had underestimated the cruelty of those who judged without understanding. Even as she finished one exhausting exercise after another, she felt a nagging fear that something more was coming, that the tattoo alone could not protect her from the shadow from the previous day seemed closer now, lingering at the edge of her vision, watching every movement. Her heart raced with anticipation and dread as she wondered who it could be and why they were so intent on observing her. Every moment felt charged with tension, and she sensed that the coming days would demand more than physical strength. They would require her to prove herself in ways she had never imagined, leaving her mind spinning with questions and a growing sense of uncertainty about what was truly waiting for her at the next drill. The third day dawned gray and heavy, with clouds that pressed down on the parade ground like a weight she could almost feel in her chest. She moved with precise attention to every drill command, but inside her mind raced with doubt and frustration. The other recruits had stopped speaking outright, but their eyes followed her every motion, silently judging and measuring her worth. The tattoo on her back seemed to burn beneath her uniform, as if reminding her that it held more power than she could yet reveal, but it also made her a target for silent scrutiny. She kept her head down and focused on completing each task perfectly, from crawling under low bars to scaling the towering walls of the obstacle course. Each success was small and fleeting. As soon as she finished, she would hear a subtle laugh or a whisper that reminded her she was still an outsider. The shadows of the other recruits seemed to stretch longer with each movement, and she felt the weight of their hidden opinions pressing on her shoulders. Even when the instructors turned away, their presence lingered, and she sensed the ridicule ready to strike at any mistake. She retreated into herself during the quiet moments between drills, tracing the tattoo under her uniform with her fingertips, remembering what it had cost her to earn it, and how it represented battles she had survived alone, battles that no one here could understand or see, but somehow the mere hint of it seemed to provoke curiosity and resentment at the same time. She wondered if she would ever be able to show them that her strength was real, or if they would only ever see a mark to mock. Her muscles burned and her lungs gasped for air, yet she forced herself to keep going, refusing to collapse under their gaze. The shadow she had noticed before lingered again at the edge of her sight, this time closer, more deliberate, watching every breath, every movement, as if waiting for her to falter. She could not see the face clearly, but the intensity of the gaze made her heart pound with anticipation, and a strange spark of hope that someone had noticed the tattoo was unsettling yet strangely comforting, and she could not help but wonder if this observer held the key to changing everything, or if their presence meant something far more dangerous. She tightened her jaw and focused on the drills, but her mind could not escape the feeling that the coming hours would bring a revelation of some kind, a moment that could alter everything she had endured so far, leaving her both anxious and strangely exhilarated as she ran toward the next challenge. The following morning, the air was thick with tension and the scent of sweat and sand. As she lined up with the other recruits, her muscles still sore from the previous day's drills, she forced herself to keep her head high and her movements precise, but she could feel the weight of invisible eyes pressing down on her once again. She had caught glimpses of the shadow at the edge of the training field before, but today it lingered closer, moving with purpose and focus. Her gaze flicked toward it, and for a brief moment she thought she recognized the figure standing apart from the drill instructors, observing every recruit with sharp, calculating eyes. There was something different about this person, not just a presence of authority, but a quiet intensity that made the air feel charged. She could feel her heartbeat quicken and her breath catch as the figure moved along the edge of the obstacle course. Their eyes briefly met, and she sensed recognition, something unspoken yet deeply meaningful. Something about the way they watched her made her feel both exposed and seen in a way no one else had managed. The tattoo on her back felt hotter under her skin, as if resonating with the attention, and she wondered if this observer knew the meaning behind it or merely sensed the determination it symbolized. She pushed herself harder in the drills, climbing walls, swinging across ropes, and running until her legs burned with lactic acid, her lungs screaming for air, and every movement measured to perfection. Yet her mind could not stop thinking about the figure watching her every move. Every stumble she made sent a jolt of awareness through her body, as if the observer would notice immediately and judge whether she belonged here or not. The whispers and stares from her fellow recruits seemed to fade in comparison to this intense scrutiny. It was a challenge unlike anything she had faced before, a test not only of strength and endurance but of presence and perception. She tried to focus on the next obstacle. Cold steel bars, the rough ropes, and the blinding sun above, yet her thoughts kept drifting back to the figure standing silently at the edge, watching her with unwavering attention. There was a sense that something was about to shift in the dynamic around her, that her life and perhaps the course of her time here would never be the same, and she felt a spark of anticipation mingled with fear that left her breathless and uncertain about what the next moment would bring, leaving the air charged with suspense as the observer stepped closer, and her heart sank and soared at the same time. That evening, after the drills were done and the recruits were dismissed to their bunks, she slipped into the quiet bathroom, her muscles aching and her skin slick with sweat. The sound of running water and the dim glow of the overhead lights gave her a small sense of privacy. She lowered her uniform slightly and traced the tattoo on her back, feeling the intricate lines and symbols that told a story no one here could understand. Each mark held memories of battles fought and won, moments of fear, courage, and survival that had shaped her into the person standing exhausted but unbroken in the middle of boot camp. She had always kept it hidden, not out of shame, but to protect herself from those who would judge or misunderstand the meaning behind it. Her fingers moved lightly over the ink, remembering the day it was earned, the pain, the pride, and the secret vow to never let it define her in anyone else's eyes. Yet somehow it had already done so with the other recruits. The laughter and whispers had cut deep, but now in the solitude she allowed herself to remember what it truly represented: strength, resilience, and a refusal to surrender. Even when all seemed lost, she could feel a strange sense of calm settling in her chest, as if the tattoo itself was giving her courage for the days ahead. but then she caught movement out of the corner of her eye, a shadow at the doorway, someone standing silently and watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. She straightened up, instinctively trying to hide the tattoo again, but the observer did not move or speak, just let her be aware of their presence. The feeling was neither threatening nor comforting, but charged with a tension that made the air feel thick. Her mind raced with questions. Who could be here at this hour? Why were they watching? And how did they know that the tattoo was more than mere decoration? She wanted to ask, but no words would come, and the observer remained still, a silent witness to the private symbol she had carried for so long. She felt a shiver of anticipation and unease, as if this moment was a pivot, a hinge on which the coming days would turn. Her body ached, her mind swirled with uncertainty, and yet a spark of something indefinable flickered inside her, a sense that recognition had passed between her and this stranger, something that could change everything in ways she could not yet understand, and that the story she had carried silently was about to intersect with someone whose presence alone could alter the course of her journey, leaving a lingering suspense that made every heartbeat feel urgent and the next moment impossible to predict. The following day dawned sharp and bright, with sunlight reflecting off the metal of the obstacle course. She lined up with the other recruits, muscles tense and breath steady, waiting for the drill instructor's command. Each movement felt heavier under the watchful gaze of the shadow she had noticed the day before. She tried to focus on the drill, ignoring the whispers and glances from her fellow recruits, but every time she shifted her shoulders she felt the weight of unseen attention pressing down. The timed obstacle course began, and her body moved on instinct, climbing ropes, swinging across bars, and crawling under low obstacles. Her arms burned and her legs quivered, but she refused to let the scrutiny break her. Every stumble drew a flash of awareness from the observer at the edge of the course, and her heart pounded with the knowledge that she was being measured, judged, and understood in ways she could not explain. Midway through the course, the drill instructor barked sharply, criticizing her pace and mocking a minor misstep. The laughter of the other recruits rose around her, and she felt the old pang of embarrassment and isolation rise like fire in her chest. She clenched her jaw and pushed harder, ignoring the pain and the voices, but suddenly a calm, authoritative presence cut through the chaos. A voice she did not recognize yet carried weight like steel, and command rang over the shouting of the instructors and recruits. The veteran SEAL stepped onto the course, moving with ease and confidence. His gaze locked on her, and for the first time the ridicule faltered. The other recruits stopped mid-laugh, glances shifted, and uncertainty filled the air. He did not shout or scold, but his quiet command demanded attention and respect, as if he could see the tattoo under her uniform and recognized the story it told. Without a word spoken, the laughter died away, and the drill instructor hesitated, unsure how to respond. Her muscles burned. She wanted to collapse, but the presence of the SEAL seemed to lend her strength, as if acknowledging that the struggle was worth it, and that the tattoo on her back held a power that no one else could challenge. She felt a spark of defiance rise inside her, a mixture of relief and adrenaline that made her push harder than ever across the remaining obstacles. Every eye was on her now, and the energy of the course shifted like a tide. Her fellow recruits began to see her in a new light, and even the SEAL did not speak, yet the nod of his head carried validation that cut through the weeks of ridicule, leaving her breathless, exhilarated, and more aware than ever that something profound had just begun, and that the coming days would hold challenges and revelations that could alter the path of her entire journey, leaving suspense hanging thick in the air. After the SEAL's intervention, the atmosphere on the parade ground shifted subtly but undeniably. She moved through the drills with renewed focus and determination. Her muscles still ached and her lungs burned, but every movement now carried a quiet confidence that had been absent before. The other recruits watched her differently, no longer with open ridicule, but with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Their whispers were softer and hesitant, as if they were beginning to question the assumptions they had made about her. The tattoo on her back felt lighter under her uniform, as if sharing in the change in energy around her. She climbed walls, crawled under low bars, and swung across ropes with precise, controlled movements. Her body responded to every challenge, as if fueled by the silent recognition of the SEAL and the quiet shift in perception among the squadmates. Each completed obstacle gave her a surge of pride and a small measure of control over the environment that had tormented her for days. Yet every glance at the SEAL at the edge of the course reminded her that the real test was far from over. He watched silently with sharp eyes and an unreadable expression that left her wondering what he was thinking, and whether he had seen something in her that she had not seen in herself. The other recruits began to mirror her intensity, some struggling to keep pace, others silently impressed by her perseverance. She noticed a few of them hesitating before mocking gestures or sideways glances, and felt a sense of quiet vindication that her strength was beginning to speak louder than the tattoo that had drawn ridicule. The wind carried faint fragments of conversation that she could not fully hear but sensed approval and hesitation blending together, leaving her mind racing with possibilities and questions. She could feel that the dynamics of the group were changing, and that the next drill would reveal more than just physical capability. The shadow of uncertainty and tension hovered over the training field, leaving her alert and ready for whatever came next. She could sense that the SEAL was waiting for a moment to test her further, or to push her beyond what she thought she could endure. Each movement she made felt like a prelude to revelation or challenge, leaving her heart pounding, and her senses sharpened. The sense of anticipation was almost tangible, and the thought that something monumental was about to happen lingered in the air. Her mind cycled through strategies and possibilities, and she felt a thrill of both fear and excitement. She knew that the coming exercises would push her further than she had ever been pushed, and that the real judgment of her strength and determination was still ahead, leaving a charged suspense in the air that made every heartbeat feel like a countdown to the next test. The morning of the surprise endurance exercise arrived with a cold wind that cut through the thin layer of sweat on her skin. She lined up with the other recruits, feeling the tension in every muscle, and the steady burn from the previous drills. Her mind raced with anticipation and dread. She knew that today would push her beyond anything she had endured so far. The whistle blew, and the recruits surged forward across the uneven terrain. She forced herself to focus on each step, each movement, while the wind whipped past her ears, carrying the muffled shouts of the drill instructors and the strained gasps of her fellow recruits. Her legs screamed with every stride, and her lungs felt as if they were on fire, but she refused to slow. She remembered the tattoo on her back and the promise it symbolized, a silent vow to endure, to survive, and to rise above. Every glance toward the edge of the course revealed the SEAL standing silently, his gaze fixed on her movements and the tattoo barely visible above her uniform straps. She could not tell what he was thinking, or whether he was impressed or merely assessing the limits of her resolve. She pushed through, crawling under mud-drenched obstacles, swinging from ropes and climbing walls slick with rainwater. Each success brought a fleeting surge of adrenaline, followed by a wave of exhaustion, and yet she pressed on. The other recruits faltered around her, some collapsing under the strain, others slowing their pace. In a mixture of awe and envy, her presence seemed to shift the energy of the group, turning the challenge into a contest of endurance and determination rather than simple physical exercise. Every step forward felt like a defiance of the ridicule that had plagued her from the start. She could feel the SEAL's gaze burning into her back as she swung across a bar, her fingers slipping once but gripping tighter the second time. The sense of being watched spurred her on, fueling every muscle. With determination, she felt a strange exhilaration mingled with fear as the course stretched endlessly before her and the finish line remained just out of reach. The wind howled and the mud clung to her exhausted body, but she could not stop and would not stop. She sensed that the SEAL was waiting for a moment of decision, to see if she would break or rise above. Every movement became a test not only of strength but of will, leaving her heart pounding and her mind focused on the singular thought of survival and proving herself. The tension was suffocating, and the knowledge that the course and the eyes on her would define everything left a heavy suspense hanging in the air, making every heartbeat feel like a countdown to revelation. By the time the recruits staggered to the end of the grueling course, she was drenched in sweat, covered in mud, and utterly exhausted. Her muscles trembled, and her lungs burned with every breath, yet a quiet fire of accomplishment burned within her. She had pushed beyond every limit she had thought possible, and every glance at the SEAL standing at the edge of the field reminded her that he had seen every struggle, every falter, and every surge of determination. His eyes held a weightless acknowledgement that carried more power than any words could convey. The other recruits who had mocked her in the first days now stared with a mixture of awe and tentative respect. Some avoided direct eye contact, as if afraid to challenge the resolve they had once ridiculed. Others exchanged whispers, but there was a subtle change in tone, curiosity and uncertainty replacing the cruelty that had dominated before. The tattoo on her back no longer seemed like a mark of ridicule, but a symbol that commanded attention and silently told the story of strength and survival. She felt the strange satisfaction of proving herself not just physically but mentally and emotionally against a group that had doubted her from the start. The SEAL approached quietly, his presence calm yet commanding, making the air feel heavier with tension. He did not boast or praise in loud words, yet the tilt of his head, the brief nod, the slight tightening of his gaze spoke volumes. She realized that his recognition was not casual but deliberate, a silent confirmation that she had met a standard few could claim. The recruits watched the exchange with silent fascination, and the energy around her shifted like a tide, leaving a palpable suspense as everyone awaited the next move. The shadow of doubt and mockery that had followed her since arrival was gone, replaced by a cautious admiration and a hint of wariness, as if they were beginning to understand that she was no ordinary recruit, every fiber of her being was spent, yet the mind raced ahead. Wondering what challenges still lay ahead, what the SEAL had seen, and what this recognition truly meant for her future in the squad, she could feel the shifting dynamic around her, the curiosity, the cautious respect, and the unspoken questions that hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. She knew that the coming days would test her even further, and that the respect she had begun to earn was fragile and contingent on what she would do next. The sense of anticipation and suspense was almost unbearable as she stood there breathing hard, covered in mud, exhausted and exhilarated, knowing that the story of her strength was only beginning to unfold, leaving the air charged with tension and the unspoken promise of what was still to come. Graduation day arrived with a strange calm that contrasted sharply with the chaos of the past weeks. She lined up with the other recruits, her uniform still damp from sweat and mud, and her muscles aching from the relentless drills, yet there was a sense of quiet confidence in her movements, a poise that had been forged through struggle and recognition. She walked onto the parade ground, her boots hitting the sand in steady rhythm and the sunlight glinting off the badges and insignias around her. The other recruits watched in a mixture of awe and cautious respect. Some, who had once mocked her, now stole glances as if unsure how to approach or what to say. The tattoo on her back was no longer hidden, and she felt its presence as a quiet symbol of endurance, strength, and survival. The SEAL stood at the edge of the parade ground, his expression unreadable, but the brief nod he gave as she passed confirmed the acknowledgement she had been waiting for weeks. Every movement felt deliberate, each step a declaration that she had survived every test and earned her place, not through luck or favor but through relentless determination and courage. The drill instructors barked commands and the other recruits performed their routines, but all eyes inevitably returned to her and the aura of quiet authority that now surrounded her. She could feel the tension of the weeks dissolve into something heavier, a mix of relief and anticipation, as though the end of boot camp was merely a threshold and not a conclusion. Her mind flicked to the SEAL's gaze, and she wondered what he had truly seen in her, whether he recognized only her physical endurance or something deeper, something unspoken and powerful. That the tattoo symbolized the recruits who had doubted her now approached with tentative questions and quiet acknowledgement, leaving her to navigate the sudden shift in perception and respect. The ceremony continued. The awards were given, the names called, yet she remained aware of the eyes on her and the subtle energy in the air, a quiet tension that suggested this was not the end of her journey but the beginning of another, more challenging path. She felt the weight of every moment she had endured, from ridicule to silent observation to acknowledgement, and it pressed on her chest with both pride and anticipation. She had survived and proved herself, but the questions of what lay ahead, who would test her next, and how she would continue to carry the story of her tattoo lingered in her mind like a shadow just beyond the sun, leaving the final heartbeat of bootcamp charged with suspense and the sense that her true journey was only just beginning, and that the recognition she had earned was merely the first step toward challenges that no one could yet predict.